Behind those cozy nights at home, thousands of employees at BP go to work every day. People producing more U.S. natural gas. People building grid-scale solar capacity. People turning landfill waste gas into pipeline-quality renewable natural gas. And people delivering all of that power where it's needed. They're part of the more than 300,000 jobs BP supports across the country. Learn more at bp.com/investing in America.
Hey Giants fans, this is Chris Franklin from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome to the Talk is Cheap podcast, the show where we discuss all things related to the New York Giants. Before we begin, I want to remind you that you can read our content on NJ.com/Giants, and make sure to bookmark that to get the latest Giants news and analysis. Well, the Giants are on their bye week now after losing to the Carolina Panthers. Yes, those Carolina Panthers. While this is a new low to the season, there could be one bright spot for some people, with the possibility of a new quarterback under center after the bye. We'll get to more about that in a bit, but right now we want to speak with someone who's just coming back from Munich, Germany, Giants beat reporter Darryl Slater. Darryl, how's it going, man?
Hey Chris, doing well. Reacclimating to East Coast time. It was a nice, fun trip. Obviously, the game didn't go the way Giants fans would hope, but yeah, it was an interesting experience for sure.
Nice. Well, I'm glad you're back home safely. It was fun watching that. It's always fun watching these international games, and we'll get more about that in a little bit. But first off, let's go to our kickoff question. And it looks like there may be, as I was mentioning, that light at the end of the tunnel, there may be a quarterback change on the horizon. There's some non-committal stuff going on in terms of whether Daniel Jones will be the starter, or we're looking at Drew Lock potentially, or even Tommy DeVito taking over and being under center when they come out of the bye. So I'm going to ask you this, Darryl. Which quarterback should the Giants go with, and which one will they ultimately decide to go with after the bye?
I think Drew Lock is the answer to both those questions. We'll start with the should. I think is kind of just goes with the why they're going to surely do it. So, Daniel Jones obviously has been awful since he got his 82 what is a 2-year $82 million contract essentially that they can get out of after this year. Everyone knows there's a $23 million injury guarantee. That's why they would potentially put him in bubble wrap with the season, in the toilet. And I would expect him to do that. They are not officially mathematically eliminated, obviously, but at 2-8, the season is over. And they can kind of hide, I think, behind the oh, this is a football decision. We're looking for a spark on offense rationale, because he's been so bad, and he was so bad against a really bad Panthers defense. He was bad against an awful defense, and so they could just sort of say, "Oh, that's the last straw. We're going to look for a spark." And I think it would send the wrong message to go right to DeVito. Even though, Drew Lock is not good either. Okay, so it's not like Drew Lock gives him a better chance to win. He doesn't, and they'll say he does, but he doesn't. So again, he's not good. If in an ideal world they would have had Russell Wilson, but why would you have come here if you're Russell Wilson when you could have gone where he's gone? Better team, better chance to start, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it'll be Drew Lock, I'm sure, against the Bucs, and what they should do is just put Daniel Jones in bubble wrap. Now, yeah, I mean it pretty much means, like, you could say, okay, it means they're tanking the season and waving the white flag. Sure, you definitely, right. But the bottom line is Daniel Jones has been so bad. I mean, the step down to Drew Lock, yes, there's a step down. Is it considerable? It's hard to say yes at this point because of how bad Daniel Jones has been. I mean, they're done with him. I mean, we knew they were done with him over the offseason when they tried to trade up for Drake May, and they said they wanted to trade up for Jaden Daniels, even though that was a pipe dream. The bottom line, if you're a Giants fan, is it depends on what you want. I mean, do you want another regime and another coach molding the next quarterback? Okay, well, if you want that, then you should root for this team to go 2-15, because if they go 2-15, they're probably getting the number one pick. They're probably getting their choice of quarterback in a year when this is not a great quarterback draft class by all accounts. Okay, then you're probably getting a new coach too. So if you're Brian Daboll, you're going to want to win games here down the stretch, and Joe Shane, you're going to want to win some games here, because 2-15 probably gets you fired. If you win 4 or 5, maybe you stick around. You got a good, I think at 5, you certainly have a good chance of 5 wins. So that's where they're at. I mean, they're second in the draft order right now, according to Tankathon, essentially tied at 2-8 with first for Jacksonville's first, right? So you look at the 2-win teams: Jacksonville at 1, Giants at 2, Titans at 3, the Browns, and the Raiders. That's the top 5. All of those teams either could or will draft a quarterback except the Jaguars. We got a long way to go here down the stretch. Like the draft order is going to change, but in the immediate, that's what the Giants are going to do, and they should. I mean, at this point, it's time to put Daniel Jones in bubble wrap because if he gets a catastrophic injury at this point, he's not going to be able to pass a physical in March, and that means they'd be on the hook for the 23 million. And you got to remember too, that's like salary cap implications. It's not just like, oh, the owner pays 23 million. Like, why should Giants fans care about what John Mayer has to pay out of his pocket? But it has salary cap implications for what they're able to do as they move on past Daniel Jones, who, let's be honest, has been in the totality of his career a massive disappointment. A massive disappointment. The 6th overall pick, he had the 9-7 in 1 year. He was 9-6-1 that year because he didn't play the finale. They rested starters, so he was 9-6-1 that year. But I mean, his overall record, and he won a playoff game, Minnesota. He's 24-41-1 in his career overall in the regular season, and he's 19-41 in games against other than the Commanders. So, yeah, I mean, he has done nothing aside from that 1 year. So it's time to move on. It's been time to move on, and the Giants will look back on that 2-year, $82 million essentially deal that they gave him, and they're going to have to eat some dead money next year as a massive, massive mistake and one of the worst contracts in franchise history.
Well said. It was really bad. Now, for me, when I'm looking at it, the quarterback they should go with is Tommy DeVito because I think it's designed to be fully invested in the tank. They really need a quarterback. You look at so many pieces around here. We heard so much. Oh, we need to get weapons for our quarterback, Daniel Jones. Blah 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 blah. What have you? And it's not working. We all see it's not working with him as the starter, and they need to move on from that. The thing is, when you look at you mentioned the other teams that they're fighting for, teams like the Titans. I think they're going to go neck and neck with the Titans down for that top seed. I think the Jaguars might accidentally win a couple games with just because of who they have on that roster. I think they're too good to be the number 1 pick overall, and that's saying something with them being 2-8. I look at the Tennessee Titans. You need to race for that number 1 pick, and you're looking at a lot of those teams that are on their remaining schedule. They still have to play the Jaguars, which was a wash, but they also have the Vikings, who are still trying to fight for a playoff spot. They got the Commanders, Cincinnati Bengals, the Colts. There's going to be a lot of losses in there. So I think, at least with DeVito, you have a better shot. They'll ultimately, like you mentioned, end up with Drew Lock, and he's got a 9-14 record, but he's shown that he can basically run an offense competently at times when he's given a chance, at least a little bit. So I think
I don't think they'll go with DeVito because, I think that sends a bad message to the locker room that you're skipping over the guy who's the backup. That's basically telling your locker room, look, we are totally tanking. And I understand, like, it's easy to say it from the outside that that's what they should do. But if a coach does that he loses the locker room, and Brian Daboll cannot afford to have that happen because you've seen signs like Dexter Lawrence saying after the game in Munich that the message isn't getting through from Brian Daboll to the players. And that's not good when one of your veteran leader stars is saying that. When the best player, certainly the best healthy player on the team is saying that. So not good. I mean, so they need to go with Drew Lock because then it gives them the plausible deniability of saying, no, we're not tanking. We just need a spark for the offense. It gives them, maybe that he can steal a win or two down the stretch because, like you said, he's been competent. So maybe they can thread the needle there where they don't win too many games. And again, Brian Daboll is not, and the locker room are not thinking about that. So this is that's like just a happenstance thing. I think that the tank, right? But obviously, you're waving the white flag in the season when you're playing Drew Lock. It's not like you're going from Daniel Jones to Russell Wilson. So yeah, the DeVito thing, it's people can say that, but it's not reality.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Well, also now we're going to looking at things. Normally, if you lose to the Carolina Panthers, as New Orleans Saints, you're looking for a new coach. The Carolina Panthers seems to be forcing people to make some franchise-altering decisions in terms of that. And we're looking right now. We talk about Daboll and we talk about Dexter Lawrence and how what he said is basically not good for his future and gets coaches fired. So let's look at the coaching position right now. If they were to go and move on ahead and do fire Brian Daboll, reversing what John Mara said earlier a couple weeks ago about saying he wanted to see him back and keep some stability. Who would be an outside the box hire that you think would be a good fit as a head coach here?
I don't think they would go outside the box. You think about the guys who would be candidates. I mean, Mike Vrabel's available, Bill Belichick, obviously, those are the main ones. I mean, they're not gonna like outside the box would be Rex Ryan, but they're not gonna do that. That would be crazy. Aaron Glenn will be a guy that's in the mix. Um, Ben Johnson, right? The offensive coordinator with the Lions would be in the mix. So do they want to go another coordinator route where the guy has never been a head coach? I mean, they've done that now. You take out Pat Shermer, but they did that with Ben McAdoo, Joe Judge, who was, a special teams coordinator, and Brian Daboll. So I think we have a little ways to go here before Brian Daboll is totally toast. But it's headed. Look, he's coaching for his job down the stretch. There's no doubt about that, and everything is on the table. I mean, in terms of changes, Adam Schefter from ESPN basically said that. He did say that, yesterday, or Monday rather, on Pat McAfee's show, and he does not wildly speculate. So yes, so this regime needs to win some games down the stretch. Again, I don't think that they would go. Would they? The question is, Would they go for Belichick? Right. So there's a lot of different moving parts there. He would be the guy that at the top of the list. Obviously, Vrabel's a notable candidate. Do you want someone that's able to develop your new quarterback, right? So whether that's the head coach or an offensive coordinator, hired by your defensive minded head coach. But the problem with that is here's the issue with that. If a defensive head coach hires, the OC, right? And the Ben Johnson thing in Detroit doesn't really matter, right? Because if the Lions win the Super Bowl with Ben Johnson as their OC because he's helped Jared Goff, Lions fans will not care about this part that I'm about to say. And that's if you have a young quarterback and you bring a defensive minded head coach and an offensive coordinator, right? To like a sharp offensive coordinator. If that offensive coordinator does well, he's going to get another job as a head coach and he's leaving. And there goes continuity for your young quarterback. So that's a what if thing, right? So that's, I think, why you see a lot of teams hire offensive minded head coaches, just because it's also an offensive league. And so at this point, right. Would Mike Vrabel fit that? That's what they'd have to ask themselves. Belichick is a guy who, again, getting back to what I was saying, they'd have to decide, do they want a full house cleaning and would they give him full control? So he went on and like ripped Joe Shane basically. So they would have to basically do a full house cleaning. And then you bring Belichick in and you're essentially giving him full control if you do that. Because even if you hire a GM, who is going to want to come work for or with Belichick? And Belichick, oh no, I'll only coach. Like no one believes that. So there's also the Dallas factor, right? The Cowboys are going to be firing Mike McCarthy, and the Jaguars surely will be firing Doug Peterson. And so, though in Jacksonville, Belichick will have no problem getting full control. And if he wants that, then that's the place for him. Now, does he think he can win there because he's chasing those Don Shula records and also chasing another Super Bowl ring? So there's all those factors. Does he think he can win with the Giants for those very reasons? So those are things to consider when you look at the Belichick situation. Obviously, in Dallas, it's a better roster than Jacksonville or the Giants, but he's not going to have the full control. Or I don't see Jerry and Stephen Jones turning that over to him. So those are all things to consider when you consider, who could replace Brian Daboll and whether that might be Bill Belichick.
Well, and you mentioned that. Do you think there's enough pieces when it comes to Belichick for him to build here and chase that and win with New York? Because it's going to obviously, being that they're in this position right now, it's going to take a while. But do you think there's enough pieces here and enough like stuff around surrounding with the organization that would lure him in and be able to take over? That he
No,
wanted to do it?
no, there's not, because the thing that would be bringing him back would be the nostalgia for the Giants. Obviously, he launched his career in the Bill Parcells era, and also he loves the Giants. A lot of success here. It would be the nostalgia, the ego factor of potentially capping his career by winning with the Giants. That would be like, I'm sure, a very fitting career topper for him, as opposed to say like, I mean, I think he probably views himself as like, I'm going to win another ring. I'm going to do it. I think doing that in Jacksonville or Dallas would obviously be an enormous feat too. But if you look at the roster, like, look, okay, so like go down the roster. Where are their holes? There are holes at more than just quarterback, and that's because Joe Shane has done a pretty poor job overall of drafting in his first two drafts to fill these holes. It's not that complicated. I mean, Their number two receiver, they don't really have one because Darius Slayton will probably be gone after this year, and Jalen Hyatt has not, um, number two outside receiver, I should say, has not. Jalen Hyatt is not impressed, not even close, right? And then we all know about Evan Neal and the miss there. Wan'Dale Robinson, pretty solid slot receiver. They got to figure out the other right guard spot with Greg Van Roten, even though the line's better. Okay, we'll give him that. Yeah, he's got a decent running back in Tyrone Tracy. The tight end position is a total mess right now. Quarterback, we know, is a mess. Malik Neighbors looks like a very good player. Okay, you give him a win on that. They got to get another defensive tackle. They've got to figure out, is Kayvon Thibodeau actually going to be a productive edge rusher opposite Brian Burns? These are all like thumbnail summations of their issues. And I certainly could go on, but I'll just move to the secondary, right? So you have a lot of questions in your secondary. Your safety, other than Tyler Nubin, is Jason Pinnock the answer there? I don't think so. Deonte Banks looks like a first round bust at the outside cornerback spot. And is Cordell Flott an answer? They have questions at both cornerback spots. Yeah, Drew Phillips at the nickel spot at the slot looks like a good rookie. So there it is right there. That's like what, a minute and a half of just running down all the non-quarterback issues that they have and why this roster, Joe Shane is saying, oh, we're close. We're close because they're what, 1-5 in one score games or whatever he said. Okay. But the results would say you're not close. And if anyone looks at the roster and goes player by player, you're not close. And that's a problem. They're not just a quarterback away. Anyone who thinks they're just a quarterback away is delusional. So that's what Belichick would have to look at. Now, if a team fires their coach, typically there's a lot of problems, right? So it's not like Belichick would be like, oh, okay, I'm going into an immediate win now situation. The Cowboys would be one of those unique situations where you have some really good pieces in place, right? Parsons, presumably, if they can get something done with him. And I'm sure he would love to play for Belichick. And obviously CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott. So the pieces are there. The pieces are there in Dallas, much more so than in Jacksonville or with the Giants, certainly.
Yeah, when I look at the Dallas Cowboys, when it comes in terms of I wonder if Parcells may have talked to him and go, you know what? I had to deal with this with Jerry. Maybe I
Yeah,
stay away. Maybe Jerry changes. I don't know. I think Ben Johnson winds up in New York, but I don't think it's going to be with the Giants. I
great
think because
call.
look, thanks. I look at the offensive pieces that the Jets have. Granted, some of these guys are the contract long term. Some of them are the one off a lot of Aaron Rodgers type, but it's got the offensive pieces like Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, stuff like that. That's more enticing for a guy to turn around. You look at the Lions, the way the Lions offense is worked. You got that. So Giants are in a rough spot right now in terms of trying to get a guy. Maybe that's why I wonder if Mara is saying maybe this is why, because when you look at the potential guys that he could draw from, you can get Vrabel probably, but Vrabel's going to need a really strong offensive coordinator with him because we saw what happened beforehand. It's not like Derrick Henry's is going to be available anytime soon. So
Good call.
yeah, good luck. So
Yeah, I think
there's
that's an
rough.
interesting point, right? With quarterback, they know they're done with Jones. They know he's finished, and they're going to have to draft a quarterback next year. They're not. They can't really wait. They can't do a thing where they get a bridge quarterback and then just hope they get Arch Manning, right? There's just too many what ifs there, right? Including like, is Arch Manning actually like awesome? Um, they're forced to draft a quarterback next year. They're not forced to fire the coach. That's so he needs to. Daboll needs to do all the things we said when they gave him the vote of confidence, which is win some winnable games down the stretch, which he hasn't done so far, not lose the locker room. That's something to keep an eye on. And not embarrass himself like Joe Judge did with a stupid press conference or dumb play calls. And he hasn't really done that, even though that flea flicker was ill advised. But so it's right there for Daboll to keep his job. And to your point, they have a choice here with whether they fire the coach and look at who's available, as you said, like who's available out there who could replace him. Yeah, that's got to be a consideration too. Like, who would we get if you're John Mara saying, who do we get to replace this coach, and would it be better? The quarterback is gone. Forget that. Like, you have no choice. You only have the guys to pick from in that draft next year. They may look back on that and say, man, we didn't get the guy in 2025. It was a weak draft, but I can't believe we won too many games down the stretch in 2023 and we missed out on Jaden Daniels and or Drake May. So but they have no choice. They have to draft a quarterback next year. They can't kick the can down the road again. Like, so, but with the coach, they can. I think they can kick the can down the road for another year.
Yeah, I'm just saying, all of a sudden, Dak Prescott, his roster, his guaranteed money begins March 18th. I'm just saying, maybe you start to look at talk to Dak. I know it's tough to do a in division trade and everything, but if the Cowboys are really upset, want to get a clean house themselves and think they've made a decision, I might kick the tires and might help you out. Who knows? A lot of time to go forward for here. But and looking back at this overall thing, since we're at the bye week, it's a time to reassess everything that's going on with a 2-8 team. It's rough. We've talked a lot about Daniel Jones and the issues that he's had, and he's taken a good chunk of the blame. Joe Shane's taking a good chunk of the blame. Brian Daboll. What's a player who's who's avoiding most of this blame so far this season?
I I don't know if there's one. I mean, maybe Kayvon Thibodeau has not impressed, but he's hurt right now, so he's not part of their current problems. But he has not done enough. I mean, we he's flash potential. I don't know if there's like one player per se. I think if you look at the interior line as a whole, hasn't been great overall. They did better in Munich. Again, no one cares because you lost to the Panthers. Like it's hard to blame a rookie like Theo Johnson hasn't been great. But again, it's hard to pin a lot on a rookie when you're putting him out there as your new tight end. And tight end's a tough position to adjust to. So I don't know if there's like one guy per se. I mean, we all know the guys who have been glaringly bad, which is Daniel Jones, Jalen Hyatt, um, Deontay Banks, right? I mean, those are the guys who you invested a lot in, especially Banks, who have just not delivered. And so um, I don't know if you could say that like Banks is definitely not avoiding the blame in terms of well, he's accepted his failures, whatever, for whatever that's worth. But also like he's not like people are outwardly like ripping him like for his failures. So it's not like everyone's like, oh hey, look over here. This is a guy you're not paying it. No, I think people pretty well understand like how disappointing he's been. So, but those would be some of the other ones. But I do think you can put this on like a Theo Johnson, like or the interior line or whatever. Like, yeah, those are problems, and I think you give a rookie the benefit of the doubt. But um, again, they've made strides. Sure, Joe Shane has said that yeah, their line's a little better, right? I mean, but they're still not good enough. I mean, they're 23rd in pass blocking in PFF. They are 17th in run blocking. Like, all right, great. I mean, in offense overall, they're 24th in PFF. In defense, they're better. They're 13th. But they're not middle of the pack in offense. Certainly, he's made that contention yesterday, which is absolutely insane and incorrect. But they are just 18th in coverage. Like they do one thing well, and that's pass block or pass rush rather. They're 6th in pass rush. These are all PFF ratings. So across the board, they're just not. They're a bad team. I mean, they're 24th overall in PFF. Right? They're a bad team. They just lost to the team that was the worst PFF rated team in the league. So even still, the Panthers are there after that win. So it's a bad team. It's a bad team, and you have to ask yourself if you're John Mara and Steve Tisch, do you trust this GM to get the quarterback pick right? And some of that's just luck because, look, if they get the number one pick and there's a consensus guy, and I guess what it's Shedeur Sanders, um, and they make that pick, um, then anyone could have made that pick, right? It's not like, you need to be an expert GM. It's all the other things. It's like getting mid-round success, something they have not done. Now, Tyrone Tracy, okay, good pick there. But Jalen Hyatt, nope. I mean, that's a terrible pick in the third round. Josh Azudu, terrible pick in the third round. We'll see, jury out on John Michael Schmitz, but he has not impressed as a second rounder. And look, they whiffed on Evan Neal and Deontay Banks, it seems. 2 first-round picks. Kayvon Thibodeau, 5th overall pick, hasn't played to that level. So not a lot for Joe Shane to hang his hat on here.
Yeah, it's rough. It is rough. And what's something that we get? What else should we expect coming out of this bye week besides the quarterback change?
Yeah, I just think a continued. I think one thing to watch will be. Okay, so right, we know the obvious things, right? Like, are they gonna bench Deontay Banks? No, probably not, because they don't have any other good options. They don't have depth. Like, I don't think you're gonna see any like significant changes. they're not changing the offensive play caller because the offensive play caller is the head coach who pushed the previous OC into a broom closet and forced him to stick around instead of letting him go to Seattle to call plays. And Mike Kafka, I'm sure, will leave after the season. I think his contract is up, right? So in terms of what to look for, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for, like, if you're a Giants fan and asking yourself, and I think this is where you're getting at, like, why should I watch, right? Like, why should I watch other than to root for them to lose? And that is certainly a reasonable take, right? Like, why should I even bother watching other than to check the score to see if they lost? And right, maybe I think the right thing to do, probably, if you're looking at this totally pragmatically, is to root for them to lose so they can get their preferred quarterback. Again, does that mean they're going to get it right? Because they preferred to give Daniel Jones that money instead of franchise tagging him and signing Saquon Barkley. If they had franchised Jones, they could have moved on after last year, and they would have been in a position where they could have, say, enticed Russell Wilson to come in as a potential bridge quarterback, like, and bought themselves some wins. Or, it's hindsight's 2020, but would they have had a better opportunity to move up in the draft, or to rather to be in position to draft like a Drake May? But anyway, getting back to your point, like coming out of the draft, the bye week, I think Tyrone Tracy is a really interesting player to keep watching, right? I mean, he had a brutal fumble, like an awful fumble, obviously against the Panthers, and you could look at that play one of two ways. It's certainly two ways, two different ways in terms of altering the future of the Giants. Like, is that the play that's going to get Brian Daboll fired? And is that the play that's going to result in the Giants landing their preferred quarterback ultimately? That those are fascinating possibilities coming out of that loss, because down the stretch last year, the Giants won games that they needed to lose. Most notably, Washington and New England. You're talking about the Tommy DeVito 3 straight wins, had the miracle comeback against the Packers as well. That in Munich, they lost a game that objectively, like, they needed to lose to help their draft status. Doesn't help their coaching job security or the GM job security, if you care about that. But look, the performance that Tracy's had has been pretty damn good. Like, he took over in Seattle when Devin Singletary was out. And since then, right, starting in Seattle, these are his total yards, rushing and receiving: 130, 107, then 32 against the Eagles when they couldn't do anything, 150 in Pittsburgh, then 69, then 104. So he's been pretty good. I mean, 4 100-yard plus total yardage games out of 6 since he became their guy that they're leaning on. And Devin Singletary was never the long-term option here. So I think Tracy's a fascinating player. Like, how does this 5th-round rookie, who all of a sudden is thrust into a big role, not even all of a sudden, it's been a few weeks now, come back from a pretty devastating fumble? I mean, the kid was devastated by it. He's going to be a piece for them. This is a good example of why you don't draft the running back number 2, and you don't need to pay him big money. You can get a guy in the 5th round, maybe, right? They tried it with Eric Gray and it didn't work, but they tried again the next year. So they draft Gray at 172, they draft Tracy at 166, and Tracy winds up being a hit, right? So that's something to watch. I think Neighbors is a fascinating person, receiver to watch down the stretch. That how he can kind of dig himself out of what's been a bit of a post-concussion rut here. He has not performed well since coming back from that concussion. And he had, in his first 4 games, 66, 127, 78, and 115, and 3 touchdowns in those 4 games. Since coming back from the concussion, missed the 2 games, right? And he has had 41, 71, 59, and 50, and no touchdowns. So how will Malik Neighbors perform with Drew Lock? Will he get frustrated? So it looked like he was taking off for like a dominant rookie year, and then he got the concussion, and for various reasons, including poor quarterback play, his numbers have really, really leveled off. I mean, you even look at like the targets and catches, like in Carolina, 10 targets, 6 catches. Washington the previous week, 11-9. Then before that in Pittsburgh, 13-7. Then 8-4. So they're trying to get him involved, and they're really pushing the ball toward his way, forcing it maybe at times. Yeah. But they have just not been able to get anything clicking with a guy who looked like he was going to be a runaway candidate. Now he's not going to win the Rookie of the Year because Jaden Daniels will win it, but certainly in the mix right up there. And yeah, drops have been a part of it for him. He's got 5 drops in 8 games played. Um, so that's let's see how he finishes his rookie year, because again, he's another guy. So I'll just pinpoint those two guys as foundational pieces for their offense, who are really really intriguing. And their offense is the thing right now that is just an absolute mess. It has been, it continues to be. They played the worst defense in the league in Munich, and they got 2 touchdowns and a field goal. So that's sort of where I stand on that in terms of guys to watch coming out of the stretch, out of the bye. Beyond like you're going to probably want those guys to play well, right? If you're a Giant fan, like the best case scenario is lose games and get promising developments from your young players. Now, can you thread that needle? Maybe not, right? But that's sort of where you're at in the ideal situation.
Cool, cool. All good points. Very, very good points in terms of that as well too. It's a lot of moving parts, so that's why you have to stay around and you have to read Darryl's works and Ryan Novozinski. Say that's 5 times fast. Ryan Novozinski's work on NJ.com is you'd see that what's going to happen after that. Now we're going to go to our overtime question, our final question of this show, and thank you all for listening to this one. Darryl, I'm going to ask you, because you were over there in Munich, which is I'm very envious of you for that. For too is a great everything you've seen and learned. I've learned about that city since I was younger. Is a good thing. Germany's a good country. What's the football culture like over there? And do you think it's sustainable? Is possible that we could see a team based there in our lifetime?
I don't think that they would do that. I mean, I don't think they could ever do that. Well, and I'll get to that's a short answer. The time zone difference is too much. I mean, it's like 7.5 hours going over there from the East Coast and 9 hours coming back. That's not time zone. That's flight time. And then it's 6 hour time difference. I mean, another hour past England. So I think, right? So it's just too much to have a team based over there. You'd have to have a whole division there. It's just a lot of complications. That's never going to change in our lifetime. Like the way the globe is oriented, those are challenges that just are the nature of the planet that we live on, and time zones. Like those are never going to change. So what was it like? It was great. I mean, I wrote a story. The Giants have marketing rights exclusive. It's not really exclusive, but they have marketing rights in Germany. You can read a story about that on our website. I won't get into it too much. It was part of Kevin Armstrong's Far Afield project that he's doing, examining the globalization of American football, and in light of the fact that the Jets, Giants, and Eagles all playing overseas this year. And this was part of that. I did this story on the Giants having marketing rights in Germany as part of that. And there's some really cool scenes, and there's certainly some very hardcore fans over there of the Giants and of the NFL. And Germany's been Germany's, it's bigger than England. It's bigger than France. I think it's the biggest European Union country. I guess not technically European country, whatever. So it's a hugely populated, developed first world country where a lot of people speak English and can relate to American football. And they have had American football over there since the early 90s. Think about the Frankfurt Galaxy, the Rhine Fire, teams that have been in that old world league, and then NFL Europe, and then that went away, and they have a new European league now. But and it was a country that post World War II had a heavy presence of American soldiers in it, in the southern part where Munich is, right? So you lived around those Air Force bases, or those military bases, right? That you were getting American Forces Network, you're getting games on TV, right? That's not the case in England, right? So Germany quickly became pretty Americanized, right? Post World War II, through the Cold War and everything, and then obviously the reunification of Germany, and it's become this developed economic power in Europe where they have a lot of buying power, and that's why teams want to get in there. There are 10 teams that have marketing rights in Germany, which is tied for the most, of all the teams in that global marketing program. But as far as that's like sort of the high level stuff, but it was a lot of fun. I mean, you could see just like scenes and stuff in Munich, in the Old Town area. There was tons of pubs that had branded themselves, pubs, really beer halls that rather than pubs, that had branded themselves with each with different teams, including teams that weren't even playing there. The Chiefs had a place, the Seahawks, the Falcons. And so it wasn't just the Giants and the Panthers. It was much more of the embracing of the NFL culture than when I went to London to cover the Jets in 2015 or to cover the Giants in 2022. Like you go to around like central London or Soho and you go to some of the pubs and restaurants, you didn't see that. That just they had a couple things like near Trafalgar Square, but this was like much more like pervasive, or to use that in like a positive way, throughout the main area of Munich. And the beer halls, the bars were like overflowing with people in football jerseys. And these were a lot of European people. You're not just talking about Americans who made the trips. You're talking about people who came in from England, who live in Germany, right? And so I got a chance to connect with a Giants fan who I know a little bit from a story that I did in London, and he came over with his kids, came down from London. It's only in like an hour and a half flight. It's like for us going to Cleveland. It's not, these are open borders for these people with EU passports. It's not like a big deal going over there. You just zip right through, and so it was a really cool scene. The game was a really cool scene. I think the culture over there, you can tell, has really embraced it. Obviously, like even separate from that, Germany is just a really interesting and complicated place, obviously, and especially Munich for historical reasons that anyone can figure out. Like very complicated history. They have a people there have an amazing perspective on that, and like our political climate and stuff. So it's an interesting time of the year to go over there, or right now, interesting time period right now to go over the day after our election, right? And to talk to people over there about just these big topics. And we don't even have to get into the politics of it all, but just those sort of things. So it was a really fascinating trip on multiple levels, and not just having to do with football and seeing people in jerseys, but yeah, I think you heard Roger Goodell say that they're going to be back in Germany. So we all seen like London be the place, right? Where they've gravitated toward for these games. Most of the international series games have been in London. Germany got one in Munich in 2022, two in Frankfurt in 2023, and one in Munich this year. Sounds like maybe they could go back to a 2-game thing next year, and maybe it'll be Berlin getting in the mix this year. Or next year rather. So yeah, really cool trip. Obviously the game for the Giants was a disaster, but yeah, it was certainly interesting. It was certainly an interesting experience.
Nice, nice, and thank you very much for sharing it with me and everybody listening to this, and thank you for sharing your other thoughts about the Giants and everything else. Once again, you can read Darryl's stuff on NJ.com/Giants. Darryl, I hope you enjoy your bye week and enjoy the rest that comes along with it. And for Darryl, I'm Chris. Everybody have a good one. We'll see you at the next show. See ya.